Hello, everybody. It's Tracy on a special evening edition of What Has Changed Your Life. Don't mind me. I just finished teaching and I'm a hot, sweaty mess, but that's okay. Tonight, we are talking to Audrey. She is a nurse in the nursing profession, and we are going to talk about depression tonight. So if you are one of my nursing colleagues, this one's for you. Audrey, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of What Has Changed Your Life.
I'm so happy to be here. I feel like this is such an important topic, regardless of, where you work or what you do, but especially in the healthcare profession. I feel like, depression is something, and anxiety too. It's something that is so rampant, and we all do this, but a lot of us push it down. So I think it's important to talk about.
Yes, 1,000%.
Yeah, right?
I've been talking a lot about one of the things I'm seeing in the nursing profession now, myself included, is a huge increase of PTSD, anxiety, depression. Here in Ontario, nurses are quitting the profession like crazy.
Yeah.
And it's because I think we are so trained to not talk about our feelings.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I 100% agree. I have a friend who is like a burnout coach, and we're speaking about this the other day. She works at a trauma 1. I work at a trauma 2. And so I asked her, I was like, is this just trauma nurses? Are we just, because we're used to this higher level of chaos and disorganization? And she was just explaining like, no, like this is like rampant every.
Did we lose Audrey?
Say that again?
Oh, I thought I lost you.
Oh, good.
All of a sudden you froze, and I went,
oh no.
No, you're back. Yay. Okay, yes. So is it just in the trauma world?
But yeah, it's not. It's everywhere. So we've kind of come to this conclusion that I'm not sure if it's just because as healthcare professionals, we're kind of trained to always, it's the duck analogy, right? Where you're like, you look smooth and calm on the surface and underneath it's chaos, but don't let anybody see it. Like, don't let anybody know.
Yes.
And so I'm not sure if that it's like that mentality has carried over or what exactly has caused us to be this way. But it's really unfortunate that we are so used to shoving these feelings down, holding it in, and not taking care of ourselves properly. And
yes,
a lot of people already struggle with depression, anxiety. Then you add last year that we had, on top of that worldwide.
Yeah.
You add healthcare professional on top of that, and then you add not dealing with these feelings on top of all of that, and it just then becomes like a cycle.
Yeah.
So, we can backtrack a little bit, and I can kind of share my story about just kind of what I think. I'm pretty sure that I struggled with depression, especially probably my whole life, honestly, and I don't think I ever had the tools to realize what was happening. And I don't think my family had the tools to, find the help that I possibly needed. And thank goodness it didn't manifest too severe for me. But it definitely got to a point where, as I was finishing nursing school, I'll never forget just this point in my life where I would kind of just lay around watching TV and then thinking that was normal. And I think that's something that a lot of us do with the way that our depression might manifest, is thinking, I'm just burnt out, I'm tired, this is normal behavior. A lot of people lay around and watch TV. But it became just day in, day out, to the point where I wasn't even leaving the house. I wouldn't even go to go buy groceries. I wouldn't go do anything for myself. And even to the point where I just, like, my personal hygiene wasn't the best. I just wasn't taking good care of myself. And I'll never forget when a friend of mine came over, and she literally just like pulls me out of the house. And she's like, we are going to go get something to eat. That's like a normal meal. And we're going to get some sunshine and all of that. Yeah. And I felt so much better. But it's interesting how when you are feeling very depressed, we don't always realize how far down that hole we've gotten or how much into that rut until somebody points it out for us. And that's been, like, for me, that was my saving grace, was having a friend that said, hey, like, whoa, you are not yourself. And able to point it out. And I think that's when I finally realized for myself that I was struggling with some pretty bad depression, and that I didn't know, my whole life I was most likely dealing with this, but I didn't ever have the tools to, help myself kind of to feel better. And that was the point when I went through some huge life changes, because I had always done the whole like seeking external happiness thing that a lot of us do, right? So I, it's like, oh, once I get married, and once I get this nursing career, and once I have this car. And so I did all the things. I call it engaged to be engaged. I found the ring, and that's its own story. But we were putting offers on we were putting down offers on homes, and we were, we had like the rescue dog that we just got, and I finished my nursing career, and then he had his great career going, and then I found the ring, and that was right around the time that, right before my friend came over to like pull me out of this depression. And I just remember my heart just sunk. Instead of being excited with joy, my heart just sunk. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think that all the things I'm doing are not actually making me happy. And, there's that cliche saying that happiness comes from within, but you don't always realize that when you're in this situation. So it kind of just got me thinking. And after that, I left. I had moved in with him, a couple hours away from where I grew up. So I moved back home, which is on the West Coast, and I'm very close to the ocean. And once I moved back out on my own, that was when things started to really change for me. And I would go to the ocean all the time, started doing a lot of hiking. And that was probably my biggest thing that helped. Was I would start hiking pretty often. And then I finally found out there's like a parking pass, because I was spending money every time I would go and park there. So they have a pass. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to buy this. It's so worth the money. And when it came in the mail, it had this whole map with all the parks in the county that I live in. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make a bet with myself, and I'm very competitive. So I'm like, I'll just make a bet. Like, I'm going to like finish this within a year and, check off all these parks. And I did. And I tell you, like, that was probably the biggest thing. Just finally the exercise behind it, the sunshine, moving your body, moving locations, away from the bed that you want to lay in all day, getting outside was such a game changer. And then that finally gave me the energy to then get into everything else that I wanted to do, and, start to find more tools to help me. So,
yeah. And one of the things with people with depression that often a lot of people, they look at them and they're like, man, aren't they lazy?
Yeah.
And it's so not true, because what's happening is they're shutting down. And a lot of people don't understand that, because they're not living that life or being in that life. So then they look at that person and they're like, man, they don't do any, like, they're just, but so instead of helping them, they just dismiss them, right? And so then you're left with no support.
And another side of that is also, I've had a lot of friends actually recently, because so I get seasonal depression pretty bad regardless. And now I've learned how to kind of cope with that a lot better. But I had some just early this month again come back. And that's the thing about depression and anxiety, is they kind of go hand in hand. And no matter how much you're doing to deal with these things, they come back randomly. And you just have to, I'm learning to just give myself the grace to realize that, hey, this is part of my life, and I'm struggling with this, but I'm learning how. But I just had this at the beginning of the month where I completely shut down, wasn't reaching out to any friends, anything like that. And then I think that on their end, they saw it like, she's not reaching out. She's very quiet. She's mad at me. I'll leave her alone, give her some space, which was the complete opposite of what I needed. I needed support.
Yeah.
They just didn't realize it. So I'm just now kind of like figuring that out with some of my really close friends, where they're kind of now like, oh my gosh, like, where have you been? And then one of them just messaged me, and she's like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that this, you were shutting down. I just thought it was something else. So I think as vulnerable as it is, it's really important if you struggle with any of these things to reach out to people and let them know how you're feeling when you're in that space that you have the energy to do so. It's so good to pre-warn. I'll pre-warn my friends. I've now struggled with this long enough that I now see the signs ahead of time. So I can like text my best friend and be like, hey, I feel this coming on. You know, I know like one of my big signs is watching too much Grey's Anatomy. For some reason, that's my show. So if I'm binge watching Grey's Anatomy and Netflix says continue watching, then it's like, that's my first sign. I text my best friend and I'm like, I'm starting to feel some type of way, you know, can you just be there for me this week?
Yeah. And it's also good if you are struggling with depression and anxiety. It's also good to, sometimes people need to talk to a therapist about what's going on, social work or therapy, just to get out of your own, as I call it, the critter brain. It tells you all these things in your head, and just to get out of your own head and look at the situation and learn how to do the tools effectively so that you're able to help yourself when you notice you're getting into those positions. So that's something that's very important, is to I would love to end the stigma of, you know, when people go to therapy, it's like, oh, they're, you know, but no, I think everybody could benefit from going to therapy. You know what I mean?
I was speaking to my therapist about that the other day, and she's so cute. She's like, I have a therapist. And I was like, oh, my therapist has a therapist who has a therapist. So
absolutely.
We need each other, and we need that community and the tools, right? Because that's what they have gone to school for. They have a way of looking at things differently than we do. And like I said earlier, when you're in that rut, like it's literally a rut, and you're just digging yourself deeper and deeper, and it's hard to see things from a different perspective when you're the one that's in it. So just speaking to somebody like a therapist who has no opinion, no bias, nothing, they're there to help you, and they're not going to go tell all your friends or, you know, your family if you don't want that to happen. You know, it's just confidential between you guys. And that's been huge for me.
Also too, sometimes we also need to be on medication, and there's nothing wrong with that either, because sometimes we need support.
I agree.
And it may be forever, or it might be for a short time. It just, everybody's different. And so it's okay to ask for help in those different ways, along with, of course, you know, meditation, journaling, deep breathing, you know, even just something as simple as getting back to your breath can help you with your anxiety if you're feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's important for people to know that it's okay to not be okay.
Exactly. That's like one of the best quotes ever. It's okay to not be okay. I just did a similar talk recently at our hospital, and just about, you know, the COVID nursing and the burnout. And that was just kind of the main focus of the speech is it is okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Let's end the stigma around this and help each other find the resources that we need. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? There's all kinds of resources out there. You can do online therapy sessions these days because everybody's doing Zoom, and you can do that. I know in Canada, we have a couple of resources here in Ontario. If you go to ontario.ca, there's funding for people if they aren't able to afford therapy. So you can go on there and you can get some assistance for that as well. And it's free. So ontario.ca. So there are lots of resources out there for people. My husband's dropping things in the kitchen because that's where I'm doing this live from, in my kitchen.
I like it.
So you probably hear cookies, things dropping.
That's
anyway, great. I digress. So after I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. So your friend takes you out and gets you to eat some real food. And then you have this epiphany like, oh my goodness, I am in trouble here. What was the first thing that you did to get yourself back on track?
Actually, it's an interesting story. So the first thought I had was, like tuna from a can is not a real meal, apparently. And I was like, how did I get so far down that, yeah, I wouldn't even go buy groceries. I mean, I would eat whatever was in my cupboards. Um, and then the first thing I did, so I kind of honestly, and I'm glad I did, I took time to process and time to kind of think, journal, and just kind of like think about where I was at. Am I happy? You know, was that normal behavior? What was going on there? And then probably within about 2 days, I was driving into nursing school, and there was an ad for Audible, which I didn't have at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's talking about, you know, you get your first book for free. And then it pops up with a picture of Gabrielle Bernstein. And it just turned out, it was like her, I forget the title of her book, but it's 40 days to create like a life of miracles. And I was like, yes, I need that. I need miracles. I need them now. I need to change my life. Everything's wrong. So I download it. I start listening to that. And she leads you in that book. She leads you into like a morning and I think a night meditation too. And so that's when I got into meditation. Mm-hmm. And from there, just finding different resources for different meditations and different ways to do like guided or, you know, whatever it was. I started to get, you know, like Facebook targets you. They really do with their ads. So I got these ads for this Kundalini yoga teacher who was virtual, like pre-COVID, you know, and I signed up for that. And then I started doing Kundalini. And it was very interesting how it's like you find one like breadcrumb and then you find another and then you find another and it all eventually you start to just find all these little pieces of yourself that, you know, can bring you back into who you are. But like I said earlier, it's not to say that you won't struggle again. And I think
it's a lifelong thing. Mm-hmm. It's not and that's the other misconception that people have. They think that, you know, you've probably heard this. Well, can't you just get out of it?
Yeah.
Well, no, if it was that easy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is you can't at the time, but it's also something that's lifelong sometimes, right? Anxiety, depression, it can be lifelong.
I would give anything for people to understand that and to know that. And people who don't struggle with it won't always understand. But I wish that, you know, like we're nurses. And so we see a patient maybe who has a heart condition. So they're taking like their water pill or whatever. And that goes usually without stigma. Like people, you know, people sit around at, you know, breakfast in the morning and talk about the different medications they're on. And did you have this side effect? And I'm having this one.
Yeah. But and it's completely normal.
It's normal. It's fine.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our mind, it's not the same. And I agree that a lot of people say that, you know, can't you just get over it? Shake it off. Wow, you're really going to cancel those dinner plans. Like, and then we say it to ourselves too, you know, oh, you're really going to cancel those plans. Wow, you are such a loser. You're this, you're that. I've had I've had a couple of family members just even like, why are you complaining? Or how is that making you sad? You know, that's wrong. Like you shouldn't act that way. And I would give anything for people to understand the way that it feels when you're in that position and know that you are not trying to make something up. You're not trying to be dramatic, you know, you're not being lazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because I think people forget sometimes that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Exactly.
And they, you know, you can see, like you say, you see things like a broken leg or a heart problem or whatever, and that's perfectly okay. But the minute you mention someone's mental health, it's like, whoa, we're not going to talk about that. Let's put a lid on that. We don't want to talk about it, you know?
And that's like the equivalent to, that's like the equivalent to like, when somebody has a broken leg, do you tell them like, oh, shake it off, keep walking, you know, finish the mile?
Yeah. What's wrong with you? We'll put the cast on later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's so true, right? And that's why this topic is so important because especially with being in the nursing profession and seeing so much, you know, death and Sickness. I know. I work in cardiac in the operating room,
Yeah.
and our patients are sicker than I've been saying this for a year. Our patients are sicker than we've ever seen them.
Yep.
And we've had some really traumatic deaths because of it. And because of how sick they are and got to us too late. And that's traumatic, right? And but when you have a debrief in the hospital, all they talk about is the technical stuff. Yeah. What could we have done technically? Yeah. But nobody ever asks you, are you okay? Right? So then what you do is you come home and you drink a bottle of wine because you don't know what else to do. Yeah. And or you eat your emotions like I've done for the last year. And that's how we cope.
Yeah. And that's why it's been such a passion of mine lately. So on my podcast, that's why I started it, was because I wanted to explore all the different reasons why we react the way that we do, and then how we can shift that, right? And it's been so interesting to me as I talk to different experts and learn different things, that it always comes back down to replacing the coping mechanisms that we have in place with new ones and better ones. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
And you catch yourself in that moment, eating your emotions, but most of the time we catch it afterwards, or that bottle of wine is gone. And it's like, I meant to only have one glass, like, oh gosh. And so it's all about starting to actually like witness that behavior as it happens. And then hopefully you can begin to intervene ahead of time. And the best thing that I'm learning to do is find a good coping mechanism, something that's a little bit healthier, more positive, and start doing that when you're feeling good, so that your brain starts to have that pathway created. And then it will become easier to get to once you are in a bad place. But of course, when we're feeling down, the old pathways are so easy. They're so well worn, basically, that we know how to, our brain just wants to do what's the easiest. And that's easy, is an old path. So I don't know. I mean, have you started to kind of find different ways to cope after a long day of work, or do you make yourself do anything?
I do. I actually exercise quite regularly, usually 5 to 6 times a week. Nice. I exercise, and I found that that's been extremely helpful in keeping my head not letting the stress overwhelm me, because sometimes it can be very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. The other thing I've learned to do with myself is, when I am feeling very sad or down, or I've had a really, as I say, when something happens at work and I come home and say it's a bad day, everybody in my house knows what that means. So when I say I have a bad day, then I let myself feel. Yeah. Because one of the things because I'm a little bit older than you, in the 70s when I grew up, you didn't talk about your emotions. You didn't have emotions, especially as children. You start acting up and you start crying, the first thing they tell you is to stop, right? So you learned very quickly not to have any emotion, stuff it down, because nobody talks about it, because why would you? Right? Like, like, why would you talk about emotions? No, we're just gonna, you're fine now, it's okay, just keep going, right? And that's how we were raised. So we don't talk about, like, it takes a lot to get us to admit when there is even something wrong, right? And so I'm learning to give myself that time to feel the emotion and not be ashamed that I feel the emotion. Because, like I said, I grew up in a time where that was no. Mm-hmm. You didn't do that. You cry in your corner by yourself. Like, nobody wants to see that. You know what I mean? Exactly. So those are the things that I do. And I meditate and I journal. I meditate every day, every night before bed. I usually don't hear the end of the meditation tape because I usually fall asleep. That's okay. And that's okay. But yeah, that's usually what I do, because I find that I don't think I would have survived this year very well had I not been doing those things.
Mm-hmm. A group of the nurses that I work with, so we are float pool nurses. We go everywhere. Basically, we're like the Band-Aids, and we get moved around. And a couple of my friends in float pool and I, right before COVID started, we got on this huge health kick, and we would have step challenges every day at work and water challenges. And it was cute. We would text this little message every day, and it was like, how many steps, how many ounces of water, and how many flights of stairs you've walked. And it was just so cute. So all day long we'd be updating each other and trying to like beat each other. And thank goodness we did that right before COVID. And then all of us ended up working on the COVID unit together. So then we were in person doing all these things and just kind of trying to make work like this fun, making health choices at work fun.
Yeah.
Because as a nurse, you know the story. You run around all day. It'll be like, I'll start my shift at 7 and then I'll like be like, oh my gosh, it's 1 p.m. and I haven't even peed yet. I haven't drank any water. I haven't even had a snack. So we're trying to kind of bring that back and normalize those healthy routines again. And so thank goodness right before COVID, we started that and we carried that on. And then I think it started to become like a thing that other nurses kind of started to catch on to. And, you know, you're wearing those big cappers all day long and you're forgetting to drink water. And, you know, we'd have our N95 mask on and we'd have to keep it on all shift long. So you forget, like, it's just because that takes so much time to take that huge capper off, clean it, put it back on and all of that versus like just leaving it on and not drinking it on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the impact of that long term is not good on our bodies. And so it goes back to kind of what we're saying, like, you know, putting yourself and your health first, whether that's physical, mental health, and your physical health affects your mental health and vice versa too. And that's another big point that I don't think that was widely known or talked about prior to, I mean, the last maybe 2 decades, maybe just the last decade. I don't know, but it seems like that hasn't been something that we've all been, we didn't really understand that growing up. So yeah, that's a big thing too. So the exercise, how that helps, and drinking enough water, good foods.
As long as you're moving your body, it changes the chemical chemistry, the chemistry of the body when you move your body. It gets those endorphins going. You feel lighter. You feel happier. That's what your body's kind of meant to do. And I always say to people, moving your body doesn't need to be strenuous. It doesn't need to be like hardcore boot camp. You could just walk. Simple. Or put a song on that you like and dance.
Yes.
In your kitchen, right? It does not need to be hard. Moving your body can be fun. Grabbing a hula hoop, bouncing on a trampoline if your kids got one in the backyard. Anything just to move your body. And the difference you'll feel by just doing that one thing is incredible. It's an incredible feeling. You will feel lighter. You will feel like there's a bit of hope. Because sometimes when we go down that rabbit hole or the toilet, as I say, circling the toilet bowl, right? Yeah. You feel like there is no hope.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes too from, it's natural when you're feeling that way to then seclude yourself even more from people. And so I push myself now. That's another thing that I do is I keep myself, it sounds so type A, but I keep myself scheduled appointments with people. So everybody knows. My friends all joke.
People?
My friends joke because they're like, it's Audrey's planner day. She's scheduling it again because I send out all these mass group texts and like all these like little individual. I'm like, are you guys, free 2 months from now on this Friday? Can we go like whale watching? And they're just like, oh gosh, she must be planning. But I have to do that for myself. And thank goodness I have friends that understand. But if I have it on my schedule, I do it, and that's just the way that I operate. So I will literally schedule, even if it's by myself, I just make sure I write it down. And I'm like, okay, 4 a.m., I'm going to hit that workout. I'm going to go to the beach, or I'm going to go on this hike. I'm making myself get outside and get some sunshine. And that's like, oh, that's been huge, because then if I don't see it, and it's just the way I operate, but if I don't see something written down and I have the whole day open, that's like lazy daytime. And, it's watching TV then, and I don't want to do anything because there's nothing that I have to do. So
it's just having a purpose to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
Right. If you've got some plan, but the good thing is those plans revolve looking after yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And then
self-care is necessary. It's not selfish.
Mm-mm.
And that's another thing we need to change, especially for women, because women think that,
Yeah.
they have to do for everybody else, but they forget about themselves. And it's like, no, you've got to look after you. Put the oxygen on you first before you put it
Exactly.
on someone else.
Yeah. I just
Right?
don't know how to like change the stigma around that besides just talking about it and making sure, that people know how
Yeah,
important that is. But,
absolutely.
and I think like leading by example is another way, when, sometimes like if friends want to make a last minute plan with me and I know, like, I already have like, that really is my chill time to myself. And if I don't get that like meditation in or that yoga time or whatever, I'm not myself. So sometimes it comes around with like saying no to other plans so that I can put myself first too, as much as, I obviously need those plans with people as well, but you have to kind of just do what you need to do. And so,
Yes.
yeah, that's another big thing is, yeah, people message, so, nope, I can't.
Yeah.
I went camping with a few friends. I think it was like last summer before COVID. But anyways, and it was the same thing. I had to go get my meditation done. And it was really cute because I had a friend who wanted to come with me to the lake. And I'm like, okay, I love you so much. I love you so, so much. And you can totally come with me, but we are going to be 30 minutes of complete silence, like no talking. Like I just need to meditate. And so she like respectfully declined. But, it's just like I would love to have put her, idea of going on this walk around the lake or whatever first. But yeah, it's coming back down to remembering what you need for yourself.
Exactly. Because that's number one, right? That's priority number one. Because you're no good to anybody else if you're not good to yourself first.
And especially too, like when you think of it from like a nursing standpoint, right? It's like we're going to work and we're taking care of, like I have anywhere from about 4 to 5 patients a day if I'm doing the primary nurse job. And yeah, it's the same thing. So I can't, if I'm feeling exhausted, burnt out, stayed up too late because I was like people pleasing by staying on the phone too long or whatever it is, I'm not myself at work. I can't provide for my patients the same way that I need to. And then we go back into that circle, like we said, where then I feel like shit about myself because then I didn't treat my patients the way that I wanted to. I wasn't the nurse I wanted to be. And then that makes you more upset. So.
And then it becomes that vicious cycle. And then the critter brain starts going and then it's that down the toilet bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's so, so important to look after your mental health, physical health, spiritual health, if that is something that you believe in, and all of it is encompassing.
Yep. Yeah.
And even, what we put into our bodies too, that's also very important about how we nourish our bodies. And yes, I still like chocolate, but still.
Right. And it's good for you in some moderation.
That's right. It's a food group, is it not? No, I'm just kidding.
But I agree. I notice a huge difference. I'm sure you do too. Like I notice a huge difference when I'm eating, making those poor choices for a few days in a row versus when I'm eating pretty clean for quite a few days. I notice like physically, I don't feel as sluggish when I eat better, but also mentally, like my mind feels more sharp, more clear, I'm more focused.
100%. And we're not saying you can't have your chocolate, because I will still have some, but in moderation.
Yeah. The other thing I've been doing, speaking of that, is I haven't been drinking very much at all because I noticed that I was doing that too after a hard shift. I'd have like a glass. A lot of people do. I mean, that is completely normal. And I have no judgment, but I had to stop because I just started to feel like that was just causing me to feel like a little foggy or even just one glass. I just don't feel great the next day. So yeah, that's the other thing I haven't been doing.
I find, especially with wine, I'm starting to not be able to drink wine anymore myself. And so, I don't drink much at all to begin with. But then, when you have a hard day, you want a little something. Yeah. So now what I try and do is I try and exercise if I have a hard day. So I'm like, okay, you're not going to do this. You're going to do this instead. And see how you feel afterwards. Or sometimes I'll just sit and read a book, right? Like stay away from that other stuff, right? Just to, because like you, I just feel terrible the next day. Like I don't feel like myself.
Yeah. And then it makes the cycle worse.
And then it
That's
makes sense. So
when I
tell
had,
us about your podcast.
oh yeah. So my podcast is called Ready to Rise, and I purposely named it that because it's like, your rise into the new you.
Yeah.
So like I said, I started it when I was feeling just as I was coming out of this depression. So I started it in December, and I felt like I was like, oh, I have like quite a few tools that I can like maybe help some other people.
Yeah.
And at work, I've worked at this hospital I'm at for about 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was post the whole story of, the ring and all of that. And everybody at work comes up to me and they're just like, how do you stay so happy? You're so bubbly. And like, you're like friends with everybody. And, how do you do this? And I was like, oh girl, if you only knew, you only knew my story. And then I just thought, you know what? I should share it because I think so many people struggle and don't talk about it. And like we're talking about, just getting those tools out there and normalizing self-care and all of that. So I started doing a bunch of different kind of, what do I want to call it? Like healing modalities or like different types of tools, resources, that kind of thing to help me. And I decided that as I was kind of learning these new things that I should share them. Mm-hmm. And so I've had a bunch of different people. So I'm like I know that I feel better when I exercise. I know I feel better mentally, like we were talking about, when I eat, when I eat a little bit more clean, and that kind of thing. And so then I decided, okay, I want to have some people on the podcast to come and talk about all of this and why. Yep. Why is this that we feel better? It's not just because Audrey said she feels better.
Yeah, there is actually scientific reasons why that happens.
Yep.
Yes.
So I did a whole episode recently on the link, like the gut-mind axis, how, our gut health affects our mental health. And then I did one, I did like an hour-long episode not too long ago on sleep, how important sleep is.
So important.
Yeah. I had no idea. I knew it was important. I had no idea how important it was. I read the book called Why We Sleep, and then I basically summarized it in a podcast, and it's amazing. I didn't know there's so much that comes out of getting a short amount of sleep. So things like that. And I'm really, really thankful that the message is kind of getting out there. And I think that in any way that we can possibly get this message out, we have to do it. If you have a message to share, you have things that work for you, you got to find a way to share that with people, because
absolutely
people need this,
Yep. And just to know that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are a huge, huge profession of women that now more than ever need each other. And if we can learn off of each other on things and tips and tricks to help ourselves get through this incredible pandemic. I was going to say a different word and thought better of it. But if we can help each other and support each other while we're all going through this, then we're all going to be better off for it 100%.
It's 100%. Just like how they teach you, like they're trying to stop the nurse bullying, that happens, or that nurses eat their young or whatever. And it's like, let's even take this just even one more step forward. Like, let's not just stop bullying, but let's like help each other now. Like it's time in general to help and lift each other up.
Absolutely. And not just in nursing, but as women.
Agreed.
I think we need to stop comparing ourselves to other people, because every single person's situation is different. They go through different things at different times. You don't know what's going on in somebody's house when their door is closed. You only see a slight package that gets presented when you go to work or your friends or whatever. And we need to lift each other up. We need to, instead of looking and judging and saying, oh, well, look at how they're raising their kids, or look at how they're handling that situation and all that BS that's out there. We need to lift each other up for sure. Because you know what? We need to support each other. Who else is going to do it? Like, why tear each other down? Like, it just makes no sense to me. Mm-hmm. Why people do that.
And
I know why they do it. I just don't like it.
Well, and then that leads back to that self-judgment too, right? So, when you're maybe looking at another woman wanting to do the things, do things the way she does them, or I always use the bake sale example. That's my favorite example. Like,
Ooh,
a
let's hear it.
lot of people like to just one up each other constantly, right? And then we have that moment where it's like 2 a.m. and we're up still in the kitchen and we have to wake up at 6, but we have to finish these brownies and like they have to be, made from scratch. But really all along, we didn't feel like that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted to just go buy them from the store and get some sleep. But we always feel like, we have to one up each other. And of course, there's people who love to bake and, want to stay up baking. And that's like actually their hobby and something they want to do. But when it's not, and you're staying up till 2 a.m. to out bake each other at the bake sale, it's like, just buy the brownies and just get it over with.
Nowadays, you can't even do that. You have to buy the individual wrap brownies anyway, because nobody's allowed to bring food.
I know.
I'm kind of happy about that.
Yesterday, I have to say this, it's so funny. So I always make a protein shake for breakfast, and because, when I'm first getting to work and trying to chart and do all that, it's quick to drink. Yeah. So I'm trying to drink it, and then my friend's like, wow, you look like you're really enjoying that. Like, what's in there? And I'm like, here, I was like, you can't try it. I was like, I just wanted to give this to you to have a sip. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's right.
No, COVID. COVID. All the things that we can't do anymore.
Anything. And I think, as we come out of this time period, things like that are still going to be weird. I don't think I'll be sharing drinks or anything like that for
blowing candles out on a birthday cake.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's doing that anymore.
I sneezed today in public and I was like, oh
my God.
Somebody's going to kick me out of here.
Well, Audrey, I thank you so much for joining me on tonight on this special evening edition of What Has Changed Your Life to talk about depression and tell your story and give other people that little bit of hope that somebody may need at this time, especially going through nursing and through all this COVID. Even if you're not a nurse, I know there's a lot of people that are at home. I know we're back in lockdown here in Ontario, and you're just feeling like a little bit desperate. There's hope.
Yeah.
Reach out for it. Go on the for Canadians, go on your Canadian Mental Health Association website.ca, go on there. CAMH downtown in Toronto has a ton of resources as well. Go on those, get some help, and get back to living your life.
Yeah.
Everybody
said it better.
Thank you so much. Be kind, stay safe, choose joy. I'm Tracy. Thanks for watching another episode of What Has Changed Your Life. Thank you, Audrey.
Bye.